Welcome back. Look, everyone tells you to wait for interest rates to drop before you buy property. Everyone's wrong. And over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why waiting might actually cost you over $100,000. So I want you to stay with me. My name's Aaron, and I help everyday Australians build wealth through property investing. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, one that keeps them stuck in the rental trap, is getting caught in the waiting game. You know what I'm talking about, right? You watch the RBA meetings, you refresh your phone waiting for rate cut announcements. You tell yourself, I'll buy when rates drop. I'll wait for the perfect moment. But here's what nobody tells you. By the time the rate drops enough to make a difference to your serviceability, the property prices have already jumped so far ahead that you're actually worse off. Now, I actually used to think the same way. Many years ago, I was sitting on the sidelines convinced that if I just waited for rates to fall a little bit more, I'd catch a much better deal. Here's a spoiler alert. I didn't. And when I finally looked at what actually happened to the market while I was waiting, I realized I'd missed out on something like $50,000 to $80,000 in capital growth. Just gone. Because I was waiting for something that mathematically doesn't actually work the way we think it does. Today, we're going to break down the actual data. We're going to look at what's really happening right now in the Australian property market. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you a framework, a simple framework that actually helps you figure out whether you should be buying now, waiting to, or doing something completely different. But before we get into that, let me tell you what just happened in Australia's property market, because the data from October 2025 is absolutely wild and it changes the entire conversation. So here's the headline. In October 2025, Australian property prices surged 1.1% in a single month, just 1 month. That's the strongest monthly increase we've seen since June 2023. And when you annualize that, we're now looking at an annual growth rates sitting at around 10.6% nationally. Let me put that into perspective. The median price in Australia just crossed $940,000. Units are sitting at $710,000. And remember, this is happening while the RBA has kept interest rates steady at 3.6%. The cash rate hasn't moved since August. Now, where are prices growing the fastest? Perth is leading the charge at 1.6% in October alone. Adelaide is up 1.5%. Brisbane is up 1.4%. But here's what's really interesting. Even the slower markets like Sydney and Canberra are posting steady gains. There's no region sitting on the sidelines. Every single market is rising. And here's the kicker. This growth is accelerating despite the fact that rates have been steady. Actually, let me correct that. The growth is accelerating because rates have been steady and because of three other factors that nobody's really talking about. And factor number one is supply is absolutely squeezed. Sellers aren't flooding to the market. Inventory is tight. When supply is limited and demand stays strong, what happens? Prices rise. Simple economics. The second factor, the government expanded the home guarantee scheme, now called the 5% deposit scheme, at the start of October. This opened the door for first home buyers to enter the market with smaller deposits. Did that increase demand? You bet it did. And increased demand with limited supply equals what? Higher prices. The third factor, the one that really matters for this conversation, is borrowing capacity. Actually expanded because of the rate cuts we saw earlier in 2025. Back in February, May, and August, the RBA cut rates by a quarter point each time. That means people could actually borrow more money, roughly $11,800 more per person, according to some of the estimates. So here's what actually happened. Rates came down, people could borrow more. They entered the market to buy, and prices went up. That's the sequence. Rates down, prices up. Not rates down, prices stay the same while you get a better deal. Now, let me ask you a question. If you're sitting on the sidelines waiting for rates to drop further, what do you think is going to happen, right? Prices are going to go up again. And your improved borrowing capacity is going to get wiped out by higher property prices. It's a treadmill. This is the truth nobody tells you. The timing isn't about waiting for rates to hit some magical number. It's about understanding what's actually driving the market right now. So let me take you back to 2020. Do you remember 2020? I wish I didn't. Global pandemic. everything locked down. The RBA slashed rates down to 0.1%, so basically zero. And do you know what happened? Property prices went absolutely mental. We're talking about the biggest property boom in Australian history. Now, here's the question. How many people do you think waited on the sideline saying, I'll buy after the price cool down a bit? Hundreds of thousands, I'd wager. And do you know what they found? Prices didn't cool down. They kept going up and up and up. And by the time people decided to actually enter the market, they were buying at the peak. They paid maximum prices, often at the top of the market. And then when rates started rising in 2022, they were underwater or stuck with massive serviceability issues. Compare that to people who bought early, people who trusted the process, who understood the fundamentals, who acted when others were hesitating. Those people are sitting on 100,000, 200, sometimes $300,000 of unrealized capital growth right now. And here's something nobody talks about. The property market doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in cycles. There's a boom phase, then a downturn, then a stabilization phase, then an upturn. And here's the kicker. You can never call the exact bottom of the market. It's impossible. By the time you're certain the market has bottomed, prices have already started to rise again. And what's more, the market doesn't peak or trough uniformly. Some suburbs are in boom phase while others are in upturn phase. Regional markets can be booming while capital cities are stabilizing. That's why trying to time the market perfectly is actually a mug's game. Let me give you an example. Calgary Boulder in Western Australia just posted 8.1% in the October quarter. Geraldton, exactly the same state, is up 7.4%. Albany up 6.2%. These are regional markets that were overlooked for years. Now they're moving faster than some capital city suburbs. Did anybody know this was coming? Sure. Maybe a few strategic investors did, but the average person waiting for rates to drop, did they know? Absolutely no chance. So the question isn't when will rates drop? The question is, where am I in the market cycle? And what does that mean for my strategy? And that's what I want to talk about next, the actual framework for thinking about this properly. Forget everything you've been told about perfect timing. Here's what actually matters. Timing your property purchase isn't about interest rates. I know that sounds wild, but stay with me. Timing is actually about three things: your financial readiness, your personal circumstances, and your long-term strategy. Let me break this down. So number one, financial readiness. Do you have a deposit saved up? Do you have a buffer for rates rising further? Can you service a loan if rates went up by 2%? Because, spoiler alert, rates could go up by 2%. They could go down by 2%. The point is, you need to be comfortable with risk. If you're not financially ready, the interest rate environment doesn't matter. You shouldn't be buying, full stop. Number two, personal circumstances. Are you planning to stay in Australia for the next 5 to 10 years? Because property is a long-term play. If you might move overseas, if you might change jobs, if there's instability in your situation, then waiting for the perfect rate might actually make sense because you want maximum flexibility. But if you're planning to stay, if you're planning to build wealth in Australia, if you're planning to use property as a foundation for your financial future, then personal circumstances might actually suggest you should be acting sooner rather than later. And number three, long-term strategy. Are you buying your primary residence or are you building an investment portfolio? Are you trying to maximize capital growth or are you prioritizing cash flow? Different strategies call for different timing. For example, if you're a first home buyer trying to get a foot in the door, your absolute best time to buy is when you're ready, when you've got your finances sorted and when you find the right property, because you're not trying to time the market perfectly. You're trying to lock in your primary residence and build equity over time. The difference between buying in November 2025 and waiting 6 months for rates to maybe drop isn't going to fundamentally change your long-term wealth if you're in the property for 20 years. But you know what will change your wealth? Missing out on 6 months of capital appreciation, missing out on 6 months of equity build, missing out on the psychological and financial security of owning your own home. But if you're an experienced investor trying to build a portfolio, then maybe you do want to be more selective about the entry points. Maybe you do want to wait for a market correction. Maybe you want to hunt for deals in specific suburbs that are about to boom. Here's the thing, there's no one answer, but what there is a framework. And the framework is this: don't wait for perfect rates, plan for realistic rates. Build financial buffers, understand your personal circumstances, and execute based on your strategy, not based on what the RBA might do next. Now, let me show you something that might actually blow your mind. Here's what just happened. Over the October quarter, that's 3 months, capital city property values rose 2.9%. I want you to think about that. That's insane. If that quarterly pace continued, we're about to talk about almost 12% annual growth. But it gets better or worse depending on your perspective. CoreLogic data shows that since February 2025, when the first rate cut hit, capital city dwelling values have increased by approximately $53,700 on the median property. That's $53,700 in capital growth in less than a year, largely driven by rate cuts and improved borrowing capacity. Now let's do a thought experiment here. Imagine you're a first home buyer looking at a $600,000 property. The RBA cuts rates by 0.25%. Your serviceability improves by, let's say, $11,800. That means you can now borrow an extra $11,800. That sounds pretty good, right? You've got more borrowing power, you can stretch a bit further, but here's what's happened in the real market. That same $600,000 borrow per property is now probably worth $615,000, $620,000 because prices have moved up by roughly 2 to 3% since February. So your increased borrowing capacity has been completely absorbed by the increase in property prices. You're not ahead and you're not behind. You're exactly where you started, except you've waited several months and missed out on any gains you could have made. But here's where it gets really interesting. The properties that were overpriced before the rate cuts, they're not overpriced now. Why? Because the entire market has repriced upwards. Everything's moved up together. The median house at $940K isn't too expensive. It's current market price, and it's likely to go higher. This is why timing on rates is almost impossible. The market adjusts so quickly that by the time the rate cut benefits show up in your serviceability, you've already been priced out into the market. So what do you actually do? All right, here's my recommendation. And this is based on over a decade of watching these cycles, making my own mistakes and seeing what actually works. First, stop waiting for the perfect interest rate. Stop refreshing the RBA website. Stop reading rate predictions. It's not going to help you. What will help you is step 1, get your finances in order. Save your deposit, build a buffer, have a stress-tested budget that works even if rates go up by 1 to 2%. Do that first. Everything else flows from that. Step 2, know your strategy. Are you buying a home to live in? Are you building an investment portfolio? Are you trying to get into a hot market? Be clear about what you're going to do, because that clarity helps you make decisions that actually align with your goals, not with whoever's predicting rates on the news. Step 3, when you're ready financially and strategically, execute. Don't overthink it. Don't wait. The data shows that by the time you're certain about timing, the market has already moved. In step 4, and here's the one that everyone misses, understand the local market. Interest rates are national, but property markets are local. Yes, Perth might be booming right now, but that doesn't mean every Perth suburb is booming. Some suburbs will outperform, others won't. Do your research, find the suburbs that are in the growth phase. Find the suburbs where supply is limited, but demand is rising. That's where the real opportunity is. And here's the truth that no one tells you. The best time to buy was yesterday. The second best time to buy is today, if your circumstances allow. The worst time to buy is tomorrow, while you're still waiting. And remember what I said at the start, that thing about the Australian property market that changes everything about timing? This is it. The market is repricing upward faster than rate cuts improve your serviceability. That's the reality. That's the data. And that's why waiting is mathematically costing you more money. So the question isn't whether you should buy when rates drop. The question is, are you ready to buy now with a plan, with buffers in place, and with a long-term strategy? Because if you are, the window might be closer than you think. And look, if this video hit home and you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I've been waiting and I didn't realize what it was costing me, then I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what's been stopping you from taking action. What's the real barrier? Is it the rates? Is it not having your finances sorted out? Is it not knowing which suburbs to focus on? And if you got value from this, please smash that like button. It gives algorithm and it helps this content reach more people who are stuck in the waiting game. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We drop new content every single week about property strategy, market analysis, and investment frameworks, and the stuff that actually moves the needle for your wealth. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and you won't miss a thing. Thank you for watching.